college tuition. Carrie, you're online.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call tonight, and I appreciate you doing this teletown hall. So my concern is with the rising cost of college tuition and the enormous student debt that come along with it. And then once these folks graduate from school, they're expected to begin a repayment of these large debts. So personally, this affects me as my spouse and I are still paying our student loan debts, and we are in our 40s. So I think it's crazy. And now I have a child who is in college, and so I'm concerned for the student loan debts that she's going to incur and how she's going to be able to afford these debts. So my question is, what are your ideas and thoughts on addressing this issue?
Thanks for the question, Carrie. I think after healthcare issues, I think the most questions I heard on the campaign trail had to do with student loans and people just being really concerned about how they were going to pay their own loans back and what was going to happen when their kids need loans. And I think it shows a real disconnect in terms of how this program has been run out of Washington, who's making the laws about it, because it seems to be by people who, are basing it based on their experience maybe 30, 40 years ago, when you could work a summer job and take out a few loans and pay for your college education. That just isn't the way it works anymore. Higher education is just too expensive, and so I think it is a priority in this House to make college both more accessible and affordable. So I'm looking forward to working with the Education and Labor Committee to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. That hasn't been introduced yet, but there's been a lot of work done on it, and it should be coming up in the next month or so. And that bill proposes that there would be robust investment in higher education, so increasing Pell Grants and other student aid programs, making sure that loans have more favorable terms, protecting the public service loan forgiveness program, and making sure there are good repayment and refinancing options for borrowers. I mean, there's a lot that's been going on under this administration, under Secretary DeVos in the Education Department, that's really undermined affordability, whether it's proposals to limit the amount of student loans that people can get, it's rolling back protections for student loan holders, cutting, not protecting the student loan public service forgiveness program. So there's a lot of work that we need to do, and there's a lot of oversight that I think we're going to have with respect to the real intrusions that this administration has made upon those things. Now, I have co-sponsored HR 1707, and that's a bill that would allow refinancing for student borrowers, and that's something that we've been hearing a lot about because so many folks have loans at pretty high interest rates that they could get refinanced lower, and why shouldn't they be able to do that when everyone else can, refinance their loans? The other thing I think we need to do, in addition to working on the affordability of college and making sure that people don't get hamstrung with so much debt, is that we need to make sure that folks are going to college because it's the right option for them. I think over a course of quite some time, there's been an emphasis on college being the only goal for kids, but I don't think that's necessarily true, and I want to make sure that we're investing also in, preparatory programs, so vocational and technical programs, because we need those jobs too. Those are good jobs, and sometimes they're the best choice for individuals. So a combination of working on trying to make higher education more affordable, and then making sure we have good options in the vocational and technical fields.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Carrie, for that great question. Now, let's go to Ellis in media. Ellis, you're live with us now online. What's your question?
Yes. Hello there, Congresswoman. I have a very simple question for you. I would like to ask you, if I may, if you could give me and the voters of the Commonwealth a visceral reaction of what you think when you see this buffoon, Donald Trump, standing behind United States of America. What does that do for you, Congresswoman, may I ask?
Oh my
Well,
fucking
I think
God.
the visceral reaction is I ran for Congress. I mean, it really was, from the day, virtually the day that this president took office, we've seen kind of an assault on a lot of the things that, I thought were shared American values. Respect for individuals and, civility in our public discourse and, our leaders, striving for higher goals, not playing to the lowest common denominator. So, I am disappointed that this president hasn't been able to step it up and become presidential. I wish he wouldn't tweet so much, and I wish that he were a little more focused on public policy than, seemingly what he can get out of the experience just for himself as opposed to the public good. So, I do think I'm on the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee is tasked with oversight of a lot of issues that have been impacted by this administration, whether it's immigration or constitutional violations or, the Mueller report, quite frankly. And we haven't seen Congress exercising any oversight over this administration for 2 years. So with this new Congress, we have our work cut out for us.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Ellen, for that question. For folks just joining us, I'm Pennsylvania State Senator Tim Carney, and we're here with Mary Gay Scanlon's first ever telephone town hall. If you have any questions for Congresswoman Scanlon, go to press 0 to one of our volunteer operators. Now, we're going to go to Dennis in Springfield. Dennis, please give us your question live on the line.
Yeah, how you doing? Just a quick question regarding, that's usual talking points. How many illegal immigrants should be allowed into our country before the Democrats step up and say enough is enough? Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis, for that question. I mean, I guess the answer is no illegal immigrants should be allowed into the country, but we have a little problem with the conversation when we're calling people who are coming to the border and legally requesting asylum. They're not illegal immigrants. Those are folks who are doing something that is legal under international law. And it's the same response we would expect to be given to our citizens if they were in that situation. So, there's been a lot of partisan back and forth on this topic. I did go down to the border to see the realities of the situation there because we've heard so much, and it's been very important to this president. He's been calling for funding for his wall. But I had been hearing from my colleagues who actually represent districts along the border that a wall wasn't the solution. So I did go down there in February, and what I saw was desperate refugees, women and children who are fleeing violence in their home countries. And I spent a good deal of time with Customs and Border Patrol agents who did not say that a wall was the solution. They said they need more agents and they need infrastructure so they can process the refugees who are coming to them. But they did not say that a wall was, what they needed. So what I would like to see, investment in those countries using the State Department and using foreign aid to help improve the conditions in Central America that are causing people to flee to our border. And there's a number of studies, one just came out last week, showing that those investments work and had actually started to pull down the numbers of folks who were coming to our border. But just this past week, the Trump administration decided to end that investment. So we can expect that there will continue to be more people coming here because they don't have a viable option. I would like to see more investment in our immigration courts. One of the issues we have is that we have 1 million people with cases that haven't been adjudicated because we only have 385 or 485 immigration judges in this country. That means we have a lot of people living in limbo. And it's not good for the country, it's not good for those individuals. And finally, I'd like to see comprehensive immigration reform where we make the rules clearer. One of the problems we have now is that when people come to this country, if they overstay a visa, or if they're trying to get a visa, and the rules are just so complicated that even with the best will in the world, they cannot often follow those rules. So we can have a humane immigration policy and still have border security and country security, and that's what we should be working towards, not demonizing hopeless and helpless refugees on our southern border.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Remember, if you have a question for the Congresswoman, press 0 and talk to one of our operators. Now, we're going to go back to media and talk to Cynthia, who has a question about important laws that have been enacted since you got to Congress. So, Cynthia, you're on the line.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for the opportunity to participate. My question is, what has Congress accomplished? And by accomplished, I mean enacted into law or soon to be enacted into law that has had or will have a real impact on Americans' lives?
Well, I mean, the first thing that Congress enacted in this session was we did get a resolution to continue funding the government. So that passed both houses. The House has actually passed a fair amount of legislation already since January. Our difficulty is getting the Senate to take it up, but, I'm not going to stop representing my constituents because the Senate isn't doing its job. But here's some of the things we've passed. Right off the bat, we held hearings on gun violence, and we passed 2 really critical laws. We passed a background check bill, which the surveys show 97% of Americans think we needed to close loopholes in our background check. So it's not saying that any new class of people cannot get a firearm if they're otherwise eligible. It's just saying that no matter where you buy it, you're going to have to pass a background check. So we passed that, and we also passed something called the Charleston loophole. And the Charleston loophole just says if the background check doesn't come back right away, and most of them come back under 90 seconds, but sometimes there's a hiccup. And right now, the law says that if it doesn't come back within 3 days, the person can buy the gun anyway. It's called the Charleston loophole because the man that shot up the church, Mother Bethel Church in Charleston, South Carolina, shouldn't have been allowed to buy a gun. And his background check didn't come back in time, so he was allowed to purchase the gun. That one's personal for me. I've visited Charleston a few times, and in fact, I was there last weekend on Sunday, and I went to Mother Bethel as I do whenever I'm down there. And just, it's a congregation that is just strong and loving and forgiving, but they should never have had to go through that. So we have passed 2 laws so far that deal with background checks. We've also passed an omnibus, a large bill that deals with voting rights, election reform, and
it does nothing.
Corruption in government. And here in Pennsylvania, we've seen firsthand what happens with gerrymandering and other modern-day voter suppression techniques. So we passed H.R. 1. That was the first bill out of the gate for this Congress. And I'm particularly proud that it included 2 bills that are mine. One is the Inaugural Fund Integrity Act. This would close some loopholes with respect to donations to presidential inaugural funds and then what that money got spent on. Right as I took office, the news started to break that there had been some hijinks with the inaugural fund after the most recent election, that foreigners have been allowed to donate to it illegally using straw donors, that there have been outrageously large donations. Just last week, there was an article about the fact that numerous people gave multi-million or $1 million donations and then in return got nominated to be ambassadors. So that's one piece of H.R. 1. Another piece is the Disability Voting Rights Act, and that's a bill that makes voting more accessible by working on making polling places accessible, making it easier for folks with disabilities to register to vote, by increasing their options for absentee ballots. So this is going to affect people who have disabilities. It can affect a lot of veterans. It can affect seniors. So I'm really, really excited about that. So that's another thing that we've passed. And then just last week, we passed the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and that expands protection for women and others subjected to domestic violence, including another really important firearms violence issue. It closes the boyfriend rule under pre-existing law, federal law. You had a protection order against a spouse. Your spouse couldn't purchase a weapon, but you weren't married to your abuser. The abuser could still get a weapon. And we have seen just in Delaware County in the last couple of weeks, we've seen multiple instances of domestic violence escalating with weapons and people either being shot or killed. So this is really important legislation. We've got to push it through the Senate now, and that's where I'm hoping that folks who are engaged enough to participate in a town hall on a Monday night will be keeping an eye on this legislation and letting their senators and letting the White House know that we want it to pass.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. Next, we're going to go to Sharon in Clinton Heights, who has a question about local taxes. So, Sharon, you're on the line.
Yes. Thank you, Councilwoman, and welcome aboard. We're so glad to have you. My question is regarding the additional school being built in the Clifton Heights area. We're already paying the Upper Darby school taxes, and to have additional new tax added on to our area would definitely put a damper on the seniors, such as myself and my neighbors out here. Is there anything in your knowledge that you could do to either assist us with making ends meet, or is there another location where we could put this school?
Well, thank you for the question. I've been following the Clifton Heights discussion. Now, that's controlled by the local school district. And I'm with the federal government, so I can't tell the local school district what to do. But it comes from a problem that's really basic to Pennsylvania, and that's that our state doesn't provide enough school funding. And it's been that way for a long time. The public education system is broken. And folks like Senator Carney and our state reps in the House are working on trying to do a better job with getting more state funding for our local school districts like Upper Darby, like Chester, like Philadelphia. Because the state isn't giving enough funding, that passes it right down through to the local taxpayers through the school district. So I can't directly impact that, but indirectly what I'm trying to work on, I've signed on to a bill to fully fund the IDEA. Now, that's the special ed law. And when it was passed 40 years ago, the federal government was supposed to fully fund it. Of course, it hasn't. And when the federal government doesn't fund it, that passes the cost again down to the local school district. So we're trying to work on getting more money from the federal government. If we can do that, it'll help even out what we're doing at the state level and then with the school district. But we really need to make education a national priority, whether we're talking about early childhood education, whether we're talking about K through 12, or whether we're talking about higher education. So that's what we're working on. The other piece that I hope is helpful as we're talking about doing infrastructure bills, and everybody seems interested in a bipartisan way of doing infrastructure bills. I'm also co-sponsoring HR 865. It's called Rebuild America's Schools, and that would provide additional funding to help rebuild our schools, especially in places like Philadelphia and Upper Darby, where there's lots and lots of overdue maintenance and rehabilitation that needs to happen.
Thanks, Congresswoman. Let me jump in a little bit, since this is a kind of a local issue. Clifton Heights is part of the Upper Darby School District, and and Upper Darby has desperately needed a new middle school for at least 10 years now. And it's true that the spot that they picked is a piece of property that they do own in Clifton Heights, but that Clifton Heights has really gotten used to having as open space. One question I had for Sharon was whether or not she's already applied for a property tax rebate. She can certainly contact our office in Springfield or Representative Mike Zabel's office and find out more information about that. It's definitely a tough thing for our seniors, particularly in these districts which are heavily taxed because of the state's inability to really provide the funding that they need to provide for these schools. And that's something we're working on very hard in Harrisburg. If you're just joining us, remember to press 0 if you have a question for Congresswoman Scanlon. And we've gotten a number of questions about education and about infrastructure. I know you just touched on this today, but can you give us an idea, Congresswoman, what Congress has in mind there?
Sure. With respect to infrastructure, in fact, next week we're going to be holding a hearing about transportation and infrastructure in the Philadelphia area. We're down here in D.C. about 3 weeks a month, and then 1 week a month I get to be back up in the district meeting with people. So last month when I had my week, we made a point of going around and meeting with a variety of stakeholders throughout the district who are involved in transportation infrastructure. So we met with Sefton, we met with folks at the port, and talked with folks about the schools. So I'm really excited about the prospect of having an infrastructure bill because it's not just an investment in bricks and mortar and roads and everything, which is great because anyone who's driven on the Schuylkill knows we need to do something about the potholes. But anytime we invest that way, it's an investment in people too. It's good jobs. And so I'm excited about the prospect to have those kind of good jobs and then actually improve our infrastructure, which is going to help with cost to business. I mean, right now we know that people can't transport heavy equipment across our certain parts of our highway system in Pennsylvania because they won't hold it. So that means those businesses have to take long detours, which is expensive for their business, and it's bad for the environment because they have to use more fuel. So I'm really excited about the prospect. We're going to be having a forum on infrastructure down in the Navy Yard next week, and we're going to bring local and national experts in to talk about where we need investment and how to make those investments environmentally responsible. So
how's everybody doing?
We've started holding hearings in D.C. already. First time there have been hearings on infrastructure in D.C. But they've already had a couple here, and now we're starting to hold them out across the country. And we're going to use the outcomes from those hearings. I'm going to use them to advocate for investments in Pennsylvania while we're drafting the infrastructure investment bill. And look, this isn't a partisan issue. People need to get to work, whether they're using SEPTA or Amtrak. We understand what it means when transportation isn't adequately funded. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work on this, and I hope folks, can let us know their ideas on what we need to work on.
Thanks, Congresswoman. Next, we're going to go to Lorelei in media, who's got a question about lobbyists. So, you're live with us now, Lorelei. What's your question?
Okay. First, I'd like to say thanks very much for letting me speak. And second, I'd like to talk to you about lobbyists. I think that a lot of politicians, well-meaning people who have the best interest at heart for whoever they're standing up for, whether they're Democrats or whether they're Republicans. I believe that anybody who goes into this goes into it with a pure heart. So, having said that, let me get in there.
Sorry, the clocks down here beep every so often. It calls people to vote, but somehow they seem off cycle. So it'll end in a minute.
Okay. What I would like to see the lobbyists taken out of our government. I would like to see that politicians can stand up for the people who have voted them in and do the things that the people want them to do without having being hamstrung by lobbyists. Big money makes its way in there, and in order to get this, we have to give that. And it's not always, well, it seldom is a good thing. How do you feel about lobbyists? And am I being terribly radical by saying I want them out of our government? And what would you do to help clean it up? Because look at our current administration. It's money. It's about money, 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 and how much can I put in my pocket? And this needs to stop somewhere because we have seniors who can't afford groceries this week.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's one reason I was so excited that H.R. 1 was the first order of business, because that's a bill that's really focused on good governance. It's focused on, there's three different buckets there. One was about fair elections, and I probably talked the most about that. But it also focused on clean government and strengthening the ethics rules and strengthening the ethics department. Many of you may remember Walter Shaw, who desperately was trying to enforce the previously agreed upon ethics rules against this administration and making sure that people divested and that lobbyists weren't being brought into the government. And that office didn't have enough teeth. So that's one thing that H.R. 1 does, is provide more teeth for ethics enforcement. Another thing it does is really tries to tackle campaign finance. Because, ever since the Citizens United decision, there's so much money pouring into elections that it's really, really toxic. So the campaign finance provisions try to increase transparency, make sure that people know exactly what's going on, but then it also tries to bring in a public-funded campaign finance system so that people wouldn't have to rely upon these large donations from corporate donations or other large groups. Now, when you talk about lobbyists, I mean, it's always good to figure out what you're talking about. Yes, industry lobbyists, we've seen some really toxic things happen there, particularly when you end up with folks from an industry, for example, writing the regulations or making the recommendations to repeal regulations. That's probably the worst example. But there are other groups that lobby that I'm not sure you're talking about. So, for example, if we have the ACLU coming in and talking about rights, or if we have a group coming in and talking about immigrant rights, or a group coming in to talk about what kind of research we should be doing about Alzheimer's disease or something. So there's a lot of people who collect together to try to get their viewpoint across, and it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about human rights or other issues. So, there's a lot that goes into it. But because we've got, these dark money forces that are trying to influence legislation, that's one of the reasons why, I'm trying to make an effort when I'm home. I'm out talking to people in the community. We're holding town halls either in person or by phone. So we make sure we talk to everyone and hear all sides, and make sure that I know what my constituents want, not what someone else is telling me I should want for them. So I think having active and engaged citizens is, obviously that's not the only thing, but that is a huge help when people end up and say, this is what we want and this is what we're interested in. So thank you for your question.
Yes, thanks, Lorelei. While we're talking about ethics, let's go to Ellen in media, who has a question about ethics. So, Ellen, you're online.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I feel like I hope I'm not being paranoid, but President Trump's appointments have been questionable from day one, from appointing his family to appointing people who were clearly not qualified and didn't have the experience to fill some pretty big positions. But as that pool of people is even getting thinner, as of late in particular, I feel like he is appointing to national security, internal revenue, Federal Reserve, Justice Department. He's hacking tech. He's making decisions based on his best interest, given that he hotter and hotter with this whole gap. And he's filling positions with people who he knows will back him and support him. I understand that appointments have to be approved by Congress, but he can get around that by putting in acting people. And also, the House only, the House might vote them down, but the Senate might not. So I guess my question to you is the Senate and the House unified in checking this president's actions in that sense?
Great question. Well, I mean, again, it's one of the reasons I ran. I don't know from the outset who I was more troubled by, the appointment of Jeff Sessions to be head of the Department of Justice, or the appointment of Betsy DeVos to be head of the Department of Education. I mean, I've worked in the legal field and I've worked in the education field, and those two appointments go right to what you said, people who were not qualified or who had radically different views about what our country needs. So, these appointments, the Senate is usually the one that, the Senate's always the one that has the power to confirm appointments that need congressional approval. So, being in the House, I can't really impact who gets those appointments. But what the House has is oversight, and we can, shed light on what's going on. Towards that end, we had a couple, I guess about a month and a half ago, we had the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, came before the Judiciary Committee, and we asked questions about such things as, this census question that is going to require people, that if approved, would require people to disclose their immigration status. That's a question that hasn't been on the census in over 50 years, and it would take it off the census because it suppressed our census results. So, we wanted to know why the Department of Justice was suddenly reversing course on that. So there's a lot of things the House can do with respect to oversight. Just last week, we authorized but did not yet issue subpoenas for the Mueller report, for related documents, for a variety of actors who've been in the White House, such as Steve Bannon, Hope Hicks, Don McGahn, Reince Priebus, and Ann Donaldson. So this Congress, this House of Representatives, is ready and willing to do the hard work of oversight. We are hopeful that when the facts are out, that people, patriots of whatever party, will follow the facts to whatever conclusion they lead to. But the Senate is still controlled by the President's party, the Republican Party, and they have not been particularly willing to exercise oversight. So that's going to be a continuing question. And, if there are issues that require Senate concurrence to exercise oversight, we're going to hope that people look at the facts and make the decisions that our Constitution requires.
Okay, thanks, Congresswoman. Next, we're going to go to Delco. Talk to Christopher Lynch, who's got a question about recycling. Christopher, you're on the line.
Yeah. Thanks for taking my question, Congresswoman. My concern is with recycling. Down here in Delaware County, we have the trash to steam plant. I understand they're firing it up again because, Philadelphia has a problem getting rid of the trash, or has a problem with recycling. My understanding is that China no longer allows offshoring of recyclables, and it impacts the air quality, of course, when you start burning this stuff, but things like that. What do you propose to take care of these, the plastic, the paper, the electronics, people's televisions? Where's it all going to go if we can't, ship it out of here? And, that's pretty much my concern.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of our whole existential issue, right? Having to reduce, reuse, recycle, and now here we're trying to do the right thing, and the recycling has no place to go. I've been tracking the situation with the Chester incinerator, and it's been a long-standing issue. Obviously, we've seen lawsuits down there before. I'm really concerned about the health and safety of folks who live near that incinerator, and how we can find solutions that will protect the environment, but even more importantly, protect their I'm so committed to trying to maintain a robust EPA because, that's a good backstop when we have a state that doesn't have particularly strong environmental protection. So, I'm looking to experts for answers at this point. But it's, as you said, it's a difficult situation. Everybody wants to, until we can figure out how to get people to use less, and simplify more, we're going to end up with these hard questions of environmental justice. And the impact on the Chester community, it's been, they've gotten hit with a lot of similar issues, and we've got to make sure that we're not impacting one community over others, and that we're finding good solutions that, as I said, protect the environment and protect people's health.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We've gotten actually dozens of questions asked online, so let's go over and ask a question. Let's see, how about Social Security? Can you tell us what about efforts are going on to protect and expand Social Security and what Congress is doing in this area?
Sure. I mean, in recent years, we've been hearing that the Social Security program has been under attack in D.C. Because some members of Congress
take these questions that we ask you, fucker.
Has been proposing cuts to Social Security and Medicare in order to pay for the 2017 Republican tax plan, which slashed taxes on the rich and on corporations.
Like you and your husband,
creating a budget hole that they now have to deal with. So
you're rich now.
Opposed these attacks on Social Security. It's an earned benefit that our people pay into. It's one of our nation's most important and successful programs. We know it's often the primary economic support for seniors or individuals with disabilities. So absolutely, it's a top priority for me and for many of my classmates who came in with me this fall. I co-sponsored Social Security 2100 Act, which has just been introduced and will be coming up for a vote hopefully in the next couple months. That would implement a benefit increase for current and future beneficiaries. It would improve the cost of living adjustment formula and create a new minimum benefit to ensure that no one retires into poverty. It would cut taxes for almost 12 million beneficiaries, and it's funded by applying the payroll tax to wealthier individuals, so folks who have income above $400,000 a year, and that should make the Social Security system solvent. And I also co-sponsored the Social Security Fairness Act of 2019. This would repeal the windfall, elimination, and pension offset provision, so it would allow all Americans to receive their full earned benefits from Social Security. So there are things we can do. Our caucus is really focused on protecting Social Security because we know how many people depend on it.
Great. Well, that hour went very quickly. Before we start wrapping things up, I want you all to know that this conversation doesn't end here. After this telephone town hall ends, you can stay on the line to leave us a voicemail with any questions you may have. If you do not have a question, we still want to hear from you. Please stay on the line to leave us a voicemail, anything that's on your mind that you want the Congresswoman or I to know. Just state your name, where you're from, and what your comment is. Congresswoman Scanlon, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Carney, for emceeing this event. And thank you, Bree and Carrie and Cynthia and Ellis and Sharon and everybody who called in. Your questions were great. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you about these issues. And please know, you can always contact our office if you go on the web, or you can find us on Facebook or on Twitter. Please contact us if you have questions, because your input really, really is important. I can't tell you how many times someone has called in and said, well, what about this bill? And it was just one that hadn't come to us yet, and we're able to look at it and say, yep, that looks good, or maybe we should try to tweak this a little bit. So please keep those comments, cards, and letters coming. And thank you so much for your interest and your enthusiasm and for being such engaged constituents. So have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman Scanlon. And thanks for hosting this first town hall and for inviting me here to moderate. Thank you to all our constituents constituents who joined our conversation this evening. Although we couldn't get to everyone's question, you can stay on the line to leave us a voicemail with your questions or a message about anything that you're concerned about. Please, feel free to visit Congresswoman Scanlon's website or my website. Thanks again for your time. This is State Senator Tim Carney wishing you all a great night. Thank you very much. Bye.
Please press 1 to leave voicemail. Please leave your message after the tone. When done, hang up or press the pound key.
Hi, Congresswoman Scanlon. This is Carly Sewell calling. I'm calling to... Oh my God, that noise is annoying. Sorry. I'm calling to ask you about why you haven't co-sponsored the Medicare for All bill, H.R. 1384. And specifically, I'm wondering if the $27,000 you received from Big Pharma is a reason why you have not co-sponsored it. And also, being on the Rules Committee, if the bill does pass in the House, I'd like to ask you to bypass the pay-go rule, which would essentially cripple the bill. I also want to ask you if you would please consider taking the Justice Democrats' pledge of no big PAC money, no corporate money, no bundling, all small dollar donations for your re-election in 2020. And I'd like you to know that if you choose not to co-sponsor this bill, you will likely be primaried. Maybe not in 2020, but maybe in 2022. So just be aware of that. All right. Thank you and have a good night.